I'm Katelyn White, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Conversations. This student-run talk show discusses how technology has impacted our daily lives and society as a whole. Today, I'm joined by Colin Pischke, who is the founder of Printer Mind 3D, which is a Calgary-based 3D printing company. We will be talking about the growing industry of 3D printing and how Printer Mind 3D is a part of that global industry. So Colin, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
It's an honor. So let's just start off first by understanding what 3D printing is, because I feel like there's a lot of people out there who might have misconceptions about it. So just tell us what 3D printing is.
3D printing is, I guess, essentially is being able to take a digital object and turn that into a physical one. There are many different ways of doing that. There are many different technologies. So a 3D printer is not a 3D printer, it's not a 3D printer. Just like some of the pieces you have here, which are made from very different technologies, but essentially you take, all they encompass is an additive process, which is starting with a blank canvas and slowly adding material to build up an object, as compared to what has been around for thousands of years, which is subtractive manufacturing, which is starting with a block of aluminum, for example, and CNCing part of that away, or using wood and saws to take material away from it. So additive manufacturing, which encompasses all of 3D printing, is just the opposite of subtractive manufacturing.
So how did you get started with 3D printing?
It was actually when I was in business school. I was in a stock trading class called Fundamentals of Investments. And at the time, for me to get a good grade, I got to be picking the right stocks. At the time, the publicly traded 3D printing companies were skyrocketing. So for me to get a good grade, I'm keeping my eyes on these ones that are growing. That got me exposed to the technology. From that point, I started really looking into what makes this company different than this company, essentially just financials, so looking at numbers, and then looking more into individual products, what makes the products different. And then a few years after I graduated, I bought my first printer, started my first company, and now my whole life is 3D printing.
So obviously your degree and your background is in business, but was it specifically those looking at stocks that made you want to start your lifetime industry of being a 3D printing company, or was there other factor that joined into wanting to start your own company?
There's definitely other factors. So I'm really passionate about technology that I think is going to change the world for the better. So when I was at the time when I was in that stock trading class, I was involved in renewable energy. So I'm a big supporter of renewable energy. I do truly believe that it will make our world a better place. And when I was exposed to 3D printing, it caught my interest in a big way, but I didn't have any exposure to it directly. So I actually went to a makerspace in Edmonton at the time, and I got to get my first hands-on experience with the printer, and that was kind of the takeoff point to starting the company and all that. But yeah, I've always been interested in technology that I think is going to change the world for the better, and a genuine curiosity around that. And yeah, I just started with getting the first printer, and it's really grown from there.
Awesome. Did you have any help when you started this, or was this 100, because you call yourself the president, the everyday man, the CEO, the founder, you encompass every part of the company. Was that literally how your company started, or was there help here and there from other people?
There's been a lot of help. Yeah, the company wouldn't be where it is today if it wasn't for a lot of help from my wife, from my parents. Actually now one of my first employees is my brother, who's helped me doing shipping and receiving. So there's been, the company would not be where it is today if it wasn't for a lot of help from friends, family, and my wife, of course.
She needs a big recognition.
Yeah, she spent weekends at trade shows. She doesn't have a lot of experience with 3D printing, but she stands there, she talks, she tries to answer the questions. It's been, I couldn't do it without all those people.
And how much, this might be going back a little bit, but how much experience did you have 3D printing? You said you went and you saw your first printer, and that's kind of how it started. How much of a learning process was that for you to build an entire company around that technology?
There's been a lot of learning. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've learned a lot of hard lessons along the way, for sure. When I got my first printer, I had this dream that I was just going to run this thing 24/7, make a living from it. I quickly realized that it wasn't going to be the case. So there was definitely, it started as just this idea, having a single printer that I was going to run 24/7, and it really has pivoted, I guess, and it's changed a lot along the ways to end up where it is today. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, of course that does. Yeah, thank you. How big do you think 3D printing industry is today? Globally, nationally, North American?
In terms of like dollar figures or?
Dollar figures and the amount of people that are exposed to it.
It's tough to say. What I can tell you is it's growing. It's growing fast. We're definitely starting to see the hockey stick kind of growth. So 3D printing followed a hype cycle. When I was in first getting exposed to it in business school, we were just really reaching the peak of this hype cycle, as they talk about in a lot of technology. So there was all of this hype that 3D printing is going to change the world, is the next big thing, and then all of a sudden people started really getting exposed to it and the bubble kind of burst. People realized 3D print, you can't do anything. One thing I hate that I hear in the industry all the time is the only limitation is your imagination. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. There are many limitations.
Interesting.
But we kind of followed this hype cycle, went back down, and then I'd say in the last maybe 2015, 2016, we're starting to grow really quickly now. So yeah, I don't know, I don't have a metric to give you, but I can certainly say that my company's grown a lot, specifically in the last 2 or 3 years. I've seen a lot of other people, I have a lot more competitors now. I also see a lot more people using the technology. And the other thing is they've started to integrate enough technology into the printers themselves so that they're becoming a plug and print solution. When I bought my first printer, there was a lot of troubleshooting. It wasn't like every time you hit print, you get a nice little object like this. Yeah, there was a lot of failures. There's a lot of learning the settings, learning how to run the machine properly. And now we've reached a point where they've integrated so much technology, so many things to help guarantee your success, that I think that's led a lot to the growth we're seeing right now.
Yeah, because it's become, is it safe to say it's become more of a user-friendly technology, where before it was very much if you have the skills and if you have the knowledge, that's the only people that can really take on this sort of task? Well,
I'd say one big thing is, so the first patents for 3D printing were filed in the 1980s. So the technology has been around for a long time. It's just what happened is these patents from these big incumbents, these big multinational corporations, their patents expired. And so what happens in this situation is all of these little guys, they take what was previously patented and they scale it down. They make it a lot smaller, a lot more affordable, because these big companies, everything is, you're really locked in. So you can only buy materials from them. Because there's a single source, they have a patent on it, all of a sudden that same material, that same machine, which if it was open to the free market would cost, I don't know, $5,000. For some reason, they're able to charge $25,000 and they can get away with it. But once those patents expired, and that led, again, a lot to the growth, all these little guys started making these kits, and that's how a lot of the companies, which are successful today in desktop 3D printing, they started selling them out of their garage, out of the back of their car. And then they really just kind of adapted, took market feedback, and they were able to improve upon it to where it is today. But yeah, it all started, really the growth came from when those patents expired and these small companies are able to take, which was previously way too expensive, shrink it down, make it more affordable, more accessible. And now, as we've kind of followed this cycle, yeah, they're just putting so much into it that makes it so much more reliable, easy to use, so that an 8-year-old can run.
I would be a little hesitant with an 8-year-old making something. Maybe they're just making rings or something small.
More basic stuff.
Yeah. So I see that you brought us a lot of different models here on the table. Were any of them made from your original 3D printer?
No.
Unfortunately.
That was a long time ago. Yeah, most of these models, I have to run a lot of demo prints. A lot of them get damaged at trade shows from people dropping them or lost somewhere along. So unfortunately, no. Most of these would be within the last 2 years, approximately.
And tell us about this hand that's on the table. It's very interesting, and I would just like to know more about it.
Sure. So one of the very cool things about 3D printing is it allows you to have the means of production to make some pretty cool objects. So this is actually an open source design, which means that I didn't design this. I don't take credit for designing this. I just made it. I just built it and assembled it. But there's a really cool, this open source community is thriving in 3D printing. And so there's a community called the Enable community. And so it's a group of engineers and designers from all over the world who design open source prosthetics for people in need. And then people who own 3D printers are able to create and then donate these to people around the world that they match they match you with.
Nice.
So this is just a very simple, very primitive, very basic prosthetic. But you can imagine for somebody, so if you or I, thankfully being here in Canada, we have access to fantastic healthcare.
Yeah.
We have a much higher standard of living than the vast majority of the other people around the planet. Now, there are billions of people all over the world who don't have that same luxury.
Yeah.
So I can make a very simple prosthetic for less than $100 in less than 24 hours, which could literally change somebody's life.
Yeah.
And so with my company, we've done a number of events which we called handathons, where we 3D print, assemble, and donate these in partnership with high school students. And those students are actually getting high school credit specifically to 3D print these prosthetic hands. And then again, we partner with the nonprofit, so we actually share them with the nonprofit, and they end up in the people's hands, for lack of a better term.
Good pun
for
there.
people who need them. Yeah.
Awesome. And so I know that's a big part of Print Your Mind 3D, the company that you are obviously the everything of. So tell us a little bit more about your social community innovations that you like and your initiatives that you take full control over at Print Your Mind 3D.
Yeah, so when I started Print Your Mind 3D, I wanted to do more than just sell 3D printers. So the bulk of the business is we sell 3D printers to schools and businesses all across Canada who want to purchase a 3D printer. But when I started the company, I wanted to do more than just sell 3D printers. So it relates back to I'm passionate about technology that I think will change the world for the better. And I don't necessarily think just printing, some of these things are great, but just printing fidget spinners all day is not exactly interesting to me and not what I'm passionate about. But actually applying the technology in ways that benefit people and the planet. So we have the EnviroMaker initiatives, which is like a nonprofit arm of Print Your Mind, where a portion of all our sales are directly contributed to supporting these projects. So things like the handathon, we were able to, we covered all the costs of printing. We purchased all the tools to put it together. We paid for the shipping for it to go to the recipients all over the world. So,
where was your big shipper? Like, where was the biggest country that you shipped to? Or the most, I should say.
We ship it to the U.S. We shipped it to the Enable Community Foundation in the U.S.
Gotcha.
And then they have different partner organizations, nonprofits all over the world. But they actually told us specifically to have them prepared for areas in rural Southeast Asia and Vietnam. So they actually gave us very specific sizing requirements. We had to actually scale this to a very specific size. And they also warned us about using certain colors. So here in North America, we've worked with local recipients to make prosthetics, but a lot of the kids here, they want to be flashy. They want to be Superman, Iron Man, whatever it might be. And for a lot of the kids in these developing countries, it's the opposite. They want to blend in, and they want us to use colors to match that. But yeah, so the EnviroMaker initiatives, the handathon has been a great example. We've worked on a couple other international projects. We actually worked with a recipient in rural Nigeria. We actually built a team of people from all over North America, which included some biomedical engineers, myself, some instructors from the University of Lethbridge who originally reached out to me to develop some very customized prosthetics for a boy there. That was a very challenging project that I learned a lot from. We've also done a lot of things into recycling. So one of the things about 3D printing is it creates a lot of waste. So additive manufacturing is more efficient in terms of producing less waste than subtractive manufacturing, but it still produces a fair amount of waste. And
that'd be like this, correct?
Yeah, so all of the white here would, in this case, this is a specific material that will dissolve in water, which is biodegradable. You can pour it down the drain. But if you were using a different kind of printer, like the ones that these were made on, this material would be the same material as the model itself. And
which
once,
I think is like this.
Yes. And so once the model is printed, all of that white essentially just becomes waste. It goes in the garbage. And unfortunately, so PLA, the material that this was made out of, is technically recyclable. It falls under the number 7. It's like the catch-all recycling number. But the thing is, there's no way to identify what kind of plastic this is. So I could put that in the blue bin, send it through to the recycling, but once it gets there, inevitably, it's just they have to transfer it to landfill because they can't identify the plastic.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time talking to the city of Calgary, large plastics producers, to see if they're willing to buy waste PLA, and nobody wants it.
Why do you think that is?
It's very low temperature. It's a low melting temperature. So things like PET, like pop bottles are made of, it's a bit higher melting temperature.
Oh, okay.
And so if you have waste PET, the plastic, producers of waste plastic, or the people who are buying waste plastic, they'll take all they can get from you. They'll take all the PET they can get. HDPE, which is things like milk jugs are made of, they'll take all of that. PLA, nobody wants it. And there's nothing, so unfortunately there's no solution for what we can do with it. So I sponsored a capstone team at the University of Calgary to build us a system so that we can recycle this. It was good in theory. It's a good first step. I'm actually working on doing another iteration of that, but
you should probably bring it to MRU.
Yes.
You know, when we have different ideas, different new ideas that we can bring to the table.
I'd love to. It's a huge problem, and the thing is, I've talked with Alberta Plastics Recycling, Alberta Plastics Recycling Association, talked to the City of Calgary, I've talked to so many people, and everyone realizes that this waste PLA is a problem, but we don't have a solution for it. And I don't have a solution for it, but I'm trying. And we just recently ran a crowdsourcing competition. We're actually in the middle of running a crowdsourcing competition where we're trying to take in ideas from other people as to what we can do with this. Because it's clearly a problem. We need a solution.
Especially now that the industry we have established is growing at a very high rate. The amount of people, even just as you said, in their basements, in their garages, that are going to be making and having this kind of waste, to have a way to make sure that we can reuse it and make it once over again reused, for lack of a better term. Would there be any way to take all this, melt it back down and make it back into a filament, or is it too low of a melting temperature to do that?
So theoretically and technically, yes, it is possible. In practice, it is much more difficult than you might think, and I speak from experience on that. So that's what we did with our first prototype when we sponsored the capstone team. So what you end up having to do is you mix in a percentage of virgin material and a percentage of this waste material. You mix it together, because what happens with plastic is same with metal. You know, if you bend a piece of metal enough times, it'll break off. Metal fatigue. Plastic has the same problem, so you can't just perpetually recycle it. You need to add virgin material in to ensure its integrity. And when you do that, you have these perfectly uniform, the virgin material are these perfectly uniform 5mm pellets. Every single one is uniform. Then you take the waste, and we tried building a grinder, which we put a screen onto it so that the output would ideally be 5mm. So it's 5mm in diameter, but it could be 20mm long. So we ran into, that was a really big problem with the first prototype, is getting perfectly consistent 5mm output from the grinder. And then, so when you take these pieces, you mix it with the virgin material, you get the filament isn't reliable. It's not uniform. You need very high quality. You need very low fluctuation in the diameter of the filament to get a proper output that you can actually use. So yes, we were able to produce filament from the waste. No, it's not anywhere near the integrity of a virgin spool of plastic.
So obviously recycling is a big project that's coming up for Print Your Mind 3D. What else is on the horizon for your company?
Right now we're working on one. So over the summer we ran an initiative where for every 10 3D printers we sold, we're going to donate one to a school or community hub who is facing socioeconomic challenges. So the students who are there would not otherwise have access to technology like a 3D printer. So we've run the initiative. We found our first school. So we're hoping to do the donation. It should be in January. We'll do the first donation, but we're going to donate a total of 2 3D printers to schools and community hubs in the Calgary area who are facing these socioeconomic challenges. We're also next week on December 11th, we're going to be running, we call it a STEM for Good event, where we're teaming up with a company called STEM Learning Labs, and we're going to run an event to teach and inspire people to utilize the technology in ways that benefit people on the planet. So I'll be giving a presentation, and we'll be talking with some other people involved in robotics and coding specific to using this technology in ways that benefit people on the planet. And we'll also be assembling a prosthetic just like this one.
Wonderful. Well, Colin, unfortunately that's all the time that we have today, but thank you so much for coming in and showing us your amazing models. This is definitely an industry that we have no idea where to go from here, except for up. We know it's going to go up from here.
It's growing, that's for sure.
But thank you so much for coming in today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And thank everyone for joining us as well. I want to give a big special happy holidays to everyone who's been tuning in. For Conversations, I'm Katelyn White.